Hello random person, Sab Nino here. A while back, I have made a top 10 list on the best SpongeBob games. So now, I want to tackle the worst ones. Unfortunately, even though there are plenty of good SpongeBob games, since there's so many, naturally they make quite a bit of trash. So let's discuss it together. Some rules. No Nicktoons games, no crossovers, no Flash games, and I had to play at least a little bit of each game. On to the list. Number 10. Super Sponge for the PS1. I'll be real, I don't even think the game is bad. It's just okay in my eyes. I simply need an extra spot, so I put it on here. In Sab Talk, I actually explained my relationship with this game and how it took me so long to get a hold of it. Unfortunately, the best way I can describe this one is unpolished. SpongeBob isn't very fun to control, the graphics are off, and the sound effects are a good way to trigger somebody's anxiety. If you want to play a version of Super Sponge, I'd honestly recommend it on the GBA. It's still far from perfect, but it feels a lot better to control. Number 9. Battle for Bikini Bottom PC. The original, not rehydrated. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I actually played this game first before the console version. I enjoyed it as a kid, but nowadays it's mostly ironic enjoyment. It's literally just minigames, and once you've played them all, there's really no point to replaying them. The minigames themselves are either brain dead easy or so difficult that even adults struggle to figure them out. The trivia sections are also a problem since a lot of them are just visual observations, and some of the answers are flat out wrong. Although, I love how communism is an answer for the question, who is Mr. Krabs' worst enemy? Long story short, just play the platformer. Number 8. Planktons Robotic Revenge. Surprisingly, I don't hate this game as much as most people. Sure, it's boring, repetitive, and feels like the team literally didn't care. However, it's an alright game to turn your brain off to. Plus, it's a decent game to play and talk over with friends. There's certainly better games to play in multiplayer. Even better SpongeBob games to play in multiplayer. But I wouldn't be insulted if somebody offered me to play this. Also, can we all agree that this is the worst looking SpongeBob model of all time? I don't care if it's far distance, it's a f***ing insult to my eyes and I want it dead. Number 7. SpongeBob Obstacle Odyssey. This is Nick Arcade, not a Flash game. It counts. I used to love this game as a kid, and I even replayed it a little bit as an adult. On its own, it's a fine platformer with less than pretty graphics. Chonky Patrick is king though. The main issue I have with it is that it's a blatant reskin of the studio's previous work. Best Friends. Looking at gameplay of both at the same time honestly makes me sad. If it wasn't for this factor, I would have honestly said this game was good. If you want an original version of this game, thankfully, Obstacle Odyssey 2 is made from scratch. Number 6. Crusty Cookoff Extra Crusty Edition. If this was simply a mobile app, then I think it's pretty alright. A simple cooking simulator that you can put on while you're in a waiting room. The problem I have with it is the fact that they thought it was good enough for Switch. Even worse, they think it's worth as much money as Rehydrated. I got it for a $3 discount, which is a lot better price-wise, but sadly it's still clunky. Switch controls do not do this game justice, and it's very easy to jumble the buttons up. And even though the Switch has touchscreen, there is no option for this game to play that way. Just play it on mobile. Sure, it has microtransactions and all the mobile game pet peeves, but at least you're not dropping $40. Number 5. Legend of the Lost Batula. This is the first ever console game in the franchise. And unfortunately it shows. SpongeBob isn't that easy to control, and the platforming is very easy to get lost in. Plus, sometimes they even get basic facts about the show wrong. It's a decent attempt at a first SpongeBob game, but they've made so many better games out of the franchise that I don't mind that this one is lost to time. Number 4. Atlantis where Pantis on console. As much as I praise the DS version of this game, the console version is unfortunately not that fun. It's a bunch of uninteresting mini-games, and half of them are either bland puzzles or rhythm games. Actually, calling them rhythm games feels like an insult to rhythm games when there's no rhythm. No joke. only the first rhythm game actually has music that you time up. The other times are just characters walking around. The only saving grace to this is the arcade section. At least those are entertaining and have very unique graphics. But I wouldn't even recommend this game just to play those. If you want a game based on Atlantis or Pantis, just play it on DS. Hell, even the Game Boy game is better than this. Number 3. The Yellow Avenger. I used to see this game all over the place, thinking it would be epic. Just look at this box art. Doesn't this look like a badass game to play? Unfortunately, what you get is a boring and forgettable platformer. This is perhaps the most boring SpongeBob game I have ever played. The cutscenes and tutorials have walls of text. Half of the game is fetch quests for other characters, and even the combat is frustrating due to most powers being code activated. Just skip this one. There's no reason to play this game, not even in an ironic sense. Number 2. SpongeBob Surf and Skate Road Trip DS. Okay, the Xbox version is unbelievably bad as well, but thankfully I didn't have an Xbox growing up, so I don't have to talk about it. Unfortunately, I did grow up with the DS version of the game, and it's not a hidden gem like the Altron trilogy. Watch that video. If anything, calling this a DS game at all is an insult to the DS. The gameplay runs at like 20 frames a second, and it's so basic that there's Flash games similar to the Sports Showcase. And guess what? Those Flash games run 20 times better than a game that is meant for handhold. I legit can't believe this game is even real. Before we get to number 1, I want to discuss a few dishonorable and honorable mentions. I'm including honorable mentions since I forgot to include them in the top 10 best video games. Plus, it could be a nice break from all this negativity. For dishonorable mentions, we have Boating Bash. It's alright, it's a unique idea, but it's sadly a little boring. Plus, the cutscenes feel unfinished. If I want to play SpongeBob in a racing game, I'd just play Nick Kart Racers 3. Nighty Nightmare. The only reason why this isn't on here is because I haven't played it personally. If that didn't stop me, then trust me, I'd put this pretty fucking high. It's very short, super handholdy, and the graphics are flat out unfinished at certain points. SpongeBob Simulator. I was tempted to put this on the list since for whatever reason the SpongeBob Wiki classifies it as a full-blown game, but it's technically a Roblox crossover, so I left it out just in case. The beta is very grindy and feels super gross to play. The graphics are weird, the loot system takes me out of the experience, and it's pretty obvious that the people making this do not give a rat's ass about the source material. For honorable mentions, we have SpongeBob vs. the Big One Beach Party Cook-Off. This is basically Cooking Mama SpongeBob edition. You cook with the Plankton family for a competition ran by Jack Kahuna Laguna. The theming to the episode is pretty artificial, to the point where other countries flat out don't mention the special in the title, but it's still fun. Underpants Slam. It's a pretty silly collectathon game, and is one of the better multiplayer games I was talking about earlier. What more can I say? SpongeBob Typing. For an educational game, it surprisingly has a lot of charm to it. The graphics are pretty cute, the games were a lot of fun to play when I was a kid, and the typing tournament has a ton of callbacks to the show. Why settle for Mario Teaches Typing when you have this? Also, this frame during the posture check freaked me out as a kid. I would have put it on my Nick trauma list if I remembered it, but then again, so much SpongeBob was on that list that maybe it was best I left it out. Alright, time for the grand finale. The number 1 worst SpongeBob game, in my opinion, is SpongeBob Hero Pants. This one upsets me a lot, since it's based on Sponge Out of Water. There's so many scenes in that movie that almost feel tailor-made for a video game. Unfortunately, what we got is a broken, ugly, unfinished, annoying, cash-grabby mess that made me flat out wish we didn't get a Sponge Out of Water game at all. First off, the game takes place after the movie for some reason. If that's the case, why does Bubbles have the book? That got burned in the film. The game itself is flat out a worse version of Planktons' Robotic Revenge. It amazes me that Activision had a boring yet fully functional game the first time, yet the second time takes so many steps backwards that you think this is a beta. The superhero meter is a cool concept, but every time it goes up, it reminds you that it doesn't last lasts long. And I do mean every f***ing time.
Become a superhero. Be careful, it won't last long.
This is dialogue that should have been for the tutorial, but the devs decided to leave it in for the entire game. The rest of the dialogue is obnoxious too, since every time you run into an enemy, the character says the same 1 or 2 lines on loop. To make matters worse, if you haven't found all the pages, they flat out guilt trip you into playing this train wreck of a game so you can get the good ending. Even if you have all the pages, the good ending is just Bubbles breakdancing. Wow, what a completely worth it final note to end the game on. I am incredibly thankful that Activision doesn't make SpongeBob games anymore, because the last 2 games made without their involvement are more polished and have more personality than whatever the fuck Hero Pants was. So that was my top 10 worst SpongeBob games. Which ones did you hate the most on this list? Did you like any of the games I mentioned? Comment below. And if you want a more positive video involving SpongeBob games, there will be an end screen to my top 10 best games at the end of the video. And as always, it's all Sab from here.